presentation will be focusing working with community groups, but especially with older age group in northwest of Ireland. And following me, Sandy Fitzgerald, culture worker, producer, will come and talk about craft, art and culture. We will have time for question and discussion. Okay, so basically my work focuses to working creatively with older people in rural Ireland. And first I want to see a little bit what does it mean living in rural Ireland, and it's working with older people and myself living up in a mountain, and if you don't have a car, you're really stuck and you cannot really get out anywhere. And so it has a really bad physical infrastructure. In other public transport system, now they introduce the rural transport system, which is give older people once a week to get into town, but that's all really. So if you live in a dead-end lane alone, most of my women I work with, their children are either Dublin or America or England, and their husband 15, 20 years ago died. So they are really in a position of not able to interrupt with each other and communicate with each other and meet with each other. So, and also the increasing elderly population in the countryside as people are moving up to Dublin or to bigger cities. High levels of social exclusion, feeling of isolation, especially among older people, and limited opportunities for social interaction, and including limited opportunities for creative expression. So, just want to see here a little bit about the active age group set up in Ireland, and Varadi, the first one, set up in '84, with a philosophy of self-help and recognition of the contribution from around people can make to society and the community which they live. The first time I got involved working with older people, it was 2001, when Sligo art officer Mary McLeod asked me to participate in a Mahmoud Intergenerational Initiative, which was set up to bring older people into a school environment and engage people with youth through creative activities. And I was taken over the passion of the art officer and the passion of the people who were running this program, and the effects that it had on the young people, on the school people, and on the older people too. And so slowly I was getting into working with the community. It's proved to be a big challenge as an artist for me, and also I realized I learned a lot, which I was able to use in my own work too. So I would like to talk about here the Girls in the Age group. For one reason, because I was working with this group for almost 3 years, a period of time, instead of 3 months or 6 months. So I could see the dynamic of the group. I could see how women change and how art and different way of activities evolved inside the group. So the Girls in Active Age Group initiative formed 2003, and it was a program, community development program of Textile Artist partnership company, and set up under the direction of Anna Sperman, community arts worker. Here again, I would like to come back a little bit how important is a passion of one person to setting up this program. Anna Sperman went and set up at least 10 to 15 different community programs under the leadership, and got all of the funding and money and connected artists to work with the group. Now, working with older people and working in the rural areas, first the problem, of course, is you have to find a space, what you will use. Well, like we meet every Monday, and the room that we got in the art center, not the art center, in the center, it was all carpeted, beautifully newly done. The tables was perfect, and we couldn't make any mess. We had to bring everything in, and we had to leave the room as we find it. So it was a few difficult problems in the beginning, had to do that, but because everybody loved being there, so in the end it's worked out fine. But we didn't even have a sink, so the water had to be brought up from the toilet and all of that. But we were there because we liked to be there, so we just, adjusted our way of working together. Now, the reason Anna Sperman called me into this project, because none of these ladies had any experience with any art whatsoever. They kept meeting on Monday, they didn't really know what to do. And Anna was trying to bring in different artists, creative workers to work with the group. But being being somebody who lived 60, 70, 80 years of their life, if they didn't want to do something, they would just say, sorry, we are not doing it. So that proved again a problem, how we are going to work with older people creatively if they don't want to do it. So Anna had this idea, bring somebody in who work with textile. My textile will connect to older people. So she called me into this project, and I arrived with a bunch of wool in different colors and huge amount of, in quantities. And as you can see, the woman straight away jumped in and took interest because it's connected to the sheep. The smell of the wool, the texture of the wool, and the tactileness of the wool is made them comfortable, and it took the fear away from them to start doing something with it. So that was an immediate success. So Anna asked me to stay on and start to work with the group. So what the next step was, I wanted to see different ideas coming from the member of the group, what they would like to do next. And definitely everybody wanted to do back. So it's an interaction between the group and an artist that you have to challenge yourself, okay, how to make a bag that in this situation, in that really cramped little room, it will work and they will be happy with their bag. So it started to become more like a two-way interaction, that they were giving me ideas and we were balancing the ideas, the techniques and the ways until everybody was happy. And then we went, one of the ladies did a tapestry workshop and she asked me, can I do tapestry? And I said, oh yeah. So we had to sort of make little looms for them, which we were able to use in that cramped classroom situation. And then we discovered that because it's a very, very slow process, the tapestry, it gave plenty of time for the women to chat and interact while they were doing their little tapestry weaving. So different stories started to emerge, and that was extremely interesting. Now, we couldn't bring in a creative writer to take these stories down, and we couldn't tape it because it would frighten them in that stage. So, but we kept a few stories wrote down after the workshop. But that's how we started to see that all of working with textile would bring up a lot of past memories from the women. And they started to request to do more textile project, which we, I think, decided to do a memory blanket, which is basically contemporary patchwork and using their own words and using their own memories that they would put down themselves. And they started to bring in images and pictures from their past, 40, 50 years old, black and white small images that we were trying to scan in and apply to the patchwork. That was also a very successful project because more memories and more trust between the artist and Amsterdam and the group sort of started build up. And what was very interesting for me, that when we are working with textile and the slow process of the textile, the stories, and I remember Mary's in the blue jumper, she was starting to tell me the story that it's really stuck with me, that it was so beautiful. She said in the old time when her husband died 15 years ago, and the old time when they put the children then in bed, then they started to work together and they brought in the turf into the kitchen, and she started to explain how they made these circular boats. And in every detail, they put the turf brick down, they put the willow and stuck them in the stove and started to weave this willow for next day going on the river. So all of these amazing stories started to emerge, and they slowly started to write it down and brought it into me to the class and say, oh, is it okay? And I said, everything is fine, what you do. So I really started to enjoy being there, and it was my treat to be there in every Monday. And there's a few images doing the memory blanket and just showing the images they brought in. Now, it's one of these little poetries they kept writing at home and bringing to me, and I just find it extremely fascinating. And also from that point, I started to meet them in Sligo when they had their Friday public transport, rural transport, and they went into Sligo, into the art shop and into the textile shop, and they started to buy stuff. And most of the time they worked at home, and one day we worked together, and they just kept bringing more work to me to see, what do I think about it. And now then I started to little bit push my luck there, and I said, what about drawing or painting? And slowly I could get the group to start a little bit of drawing and painting, and that was the second year then. And we did a few still life drawing, and they were very afraid to reproduce what they say exactly. So I decided to do just a little bit I called action painting. Just get the woman just to get the brushes and just paint whatever they like and just paint light and colors. And they really enjoyed it. And then after they were much more comfortable to working with paint. And Beatrice was their older member. She was 19 years old, and she was the oldest. I think she was the oldest in Gurchin at that point, and she was one of the really strong members of the group. And now, after a while, Anna and I decided that it's time to take the group to museum visit. So we went to see the Modern Art in Ireland Gallery. That was taken in Enniskillen in the art centre. And then we started to expose the ladies to different art forms. And then also being together outside of Gurchin was a great bonus to interact and meet with each other and have a good chat. And then we were starting to exhibit their work, and Varadi Festival is coming on just May, which is all over the country. It's for the active age group celebrating older age, and all of the creative activities will be exhibited, like theatre. There will be, creative writing, paintings, and different art forms all over the country. And the last thing, the project we did, which is connected with a huge amount of funding and application, we decided that the funding was for 3 years for the group, but they were ready to take on themselves without an artist now, so how to generate money and how to put ourselves to the public. We decided to do a calendar project, and we had 12 ladies, so 12 months. That was absolutely perfect. We got funding from Sligo Leader, from CREATE, from Department of Law and Social Affairs in Northwestern Hasbro. And funny enough, one of the funding application, Winnie, who is in the flowery little shirt, she filled it out with daughter in the summer holidays by herself. Her daughter find the application for summer, together we filled it out and give it in September when we met. She just told me. And within a few months the letter came, they got the grant. So they took now a lot of things in their own hands. Now just here I quickly brush through basically working with textile. The outcome is very important, but really what I was trying to say here, the process, why the motion, why the old people going through, or any woman going through by working with textile, is really what's happening during the process. And finally this year I'm working with my local women group, which most of them my neighbors, and they decided to do the wall hanging. But here it's really not the wall hanging, it's important that how 6 or 7 ladies come together and decide the design and what they want to do was a very important process. And here is the rolling, but the fact making process is very simple, but it takes a lot of physical work, which they really, really enjoy. And then after we finished the wall hanging, they were asking me what to do next, and I said, do you like stitching? They said, oh yeah. So they brought in their leftover thread, and they started to sit around the wall hanging and started to stitch, which created a situation which was like in the old time when women came together and did their textile work together. And I think the conversation started that one woman forgot to bring a needle and another wanted to ask for a needle. So first they poked each other with the needle before they gave it. And I said, what's that? And I said, you can't give a needle. It's bad luck. So then the whole conversation about superstition started, and they were coming up with these different superstition sayings, and then it went down to the lane that, gosh, maybe my daughter doesn't know this saying. So now the project got to the point that we were getting grants to make a book about superstition, and their artwork will accompany that book. And basically, the last part of my speak would be what is the role of an artist? And I think the role of an artist working with a community changes with different community groups. And here I just would like to point out the gain what the artist would gain working with the community group, or what I gained working with the community group. I started set up 2001 and produced cushions, slippers, hats, and then working with the group, different issues arise. And I suddenly moved from cushion slippers to doing installation work. And this installation is dealing with basically perception and how we perceive the past and how we see ourselves as we move along and how our perception of past change. And these were a direct effect of working with older people and talking with them. And this is another installation. It's really the effect of working with women, older women, and it really was about women, how we see ourselves and how we relate to present and our society, and how we place ourselves in society. And this one, I just quickly go through. This is my last commission, which was actually the direct effect being in a resident artist in a nursing home for 3 months. And this was the place I worked, and they were extremely old people with wheelchair and very arthritis hand. And it was very difficult to get in working with them, but in the end, the conversation which emerged working with wool and textile made me to think about what does it mean being in a place, and what does it mean living and born in a place. And basically, all of this conversation came to the land. Everybody was talking about their memory of the past, the land, or different way they remember the land. Like Brigitta was making haystacking, and she kept talking about when she was young, how she enjoyed going out with the family and friends during the haystacking, and she just worked 3 months with haystacking. It was quite amazing, and kept talking about it. And this lady kept making hawthorn bushes, and I said, what is that for? And when she was a girl, she went home, she was going home with a bicycle, and she fell into hawthorn bushes, and she really hurt herself, but also teared her clothes. And she was hoping that, when she gets home, her mother will, help her. And the mother really shouted with her. And still now she's 95, and it's a very hurtful experience for her. So she put it out all in textile. And this is just my last slides. And it's about the cup of tea. If you work with older people, it's always the cup of tea. You have to have a cup of tea. And I think it's here, I brought in, because I'm a 200 years coffee, so I kept bringing in my own pot. And I kept asking how to make soda bread in the open fireplace, because I had all of the equipment and the pots to it. And I kept bringing I think it was Wednesday session, every Wednesday a new soda bread, which was really bad, and they kept correcting me. So that's created a trust and a good relationship with the group. So you can even work around a cup of tea to, engage with the group in the first things. And just here I would like to just to draw attention to a few years. I didn't know, but just when I was doing this Doge research, 1993 was the European Year of Older People and Solidarity Between Generations. Anybody interested to take off to work with older people is a brilliant organization, Older in Ireland, Age and Opportunity, and they have regular, publishing. And then the Baltimore Festival is coming out in May all over the country. And Sligo Art Service put huge amount of effort and money to set up community groups throughout the country, throughout the county and in the town, and they have brilliant resources, books and evaluation book of different projects. And the last thing is artists could also initiate working with a group. You can even pull together your neighbours and work with them, and these are different funding opportunities. Create, where Sandy Fitzgerald was involved to setting up Create organization, which called that time Cafe Creative Activity for Everyone, is a brilliant organization to apply for grants for artists to work with the community. House Service Access National Lottery Grant Scheme is absolutely brilliant, and this is the grant scheme one of my older lady filled out alone, and they got the grant. So local VAC extremely helpful, local county council and art offices, you can approach them. Leader Partnership has huge money to fund them, and the Department of Rural Social Family Affairs if you're living in the Gaeltacht or in the rural area. And now if you haven't any question, I'm happy to answer. If not, I will introduce Sandy Fitzgerald. And Sandy has over 30 years of experience as a manager, artist, and activist in the cultural sector. And is the founder member, later the executive director of City Art Centre, Dublin from 1973 to 2001. And they initiated many pioneering educational practices in community arts, disability arts, and outreach program. And if I would like to talk about Sandy, it would be another 10-15 minutes if I was able to go through all of his work in his lifetime. So I better give it to Sandy to introduce himself. Thank you very much.
use this, I'm told, because they're recording it, so sorry about that. That was great, wasn't it? Great to see something happening. And I'll be touching on some of these issues, these cultural issues. I was asked to talk about the bigger picture and the context of culture and art and where we work. Many years ago, I was asked to speak here. It was the first time I spoke in the college by Noel Sheridan. He was director at the time, and he asked me in to talk about this new movement that was happening that I was very involved in, called community arts. And I said sure, and I came in and I spoke to the fine art students. And a few days later, I met Noel on the street, and I said, "Was there any reaction to my talk?" And he said, "Oh yeah, there was." He said, "The next day, I was walking through the college and I heard all this kerfuffle. I just happened to encounter a group of students clattering down the stairs with all their materials and heading for the door, and I stopped them and I said, 'Where are you going?' And they said, 'We're going out to paint the poor.'" So I have to be careful what I say, because sometimes it gets misconstrued, and or maybe it's more like in those great philosophers of the 20th century. Simon and Garfunkel said, "People hear what they want to hear and disregard the rest." So I'm going to have to rattle through this. It's going to be tough, and I'll try and focus on a couple of issues. The big question for me a lot of the time is when people talk about art and culture, what do they actually mean by art and culture? And these days you hear it used a lot with regard to the new economy and where we're going. Very quickly, I'd like to do a little bit of our audience participation. I can see the blood drain away from people's faces. No, it's okay. It's not embarrassing. This is just a little exercise. Very quickly, if you can just pass those sheets of paper down to everybody. And what I want you to do is, this is very quick. I don't want you to think about this. This is not a test. Here, let me take those off. Put them down back here. This is more for you than for me. Spread them down back there. And what I want you to do is, you'll see it's marked number 1 on one side and number 2 on the other. On the side that's number 1, I just want you to write one sentence very quickly. Don't think about it. Nobody's going to challenge you on this. If somebody asked you the question, "What is culture?" what would you write down? I want you to just write that. One sentence or one word, it doesn't matter, just very quickly. Don't even think about it, right? What is culture? And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So. No thesis, no essays, just one sentence. Okay. Now just turn it over, and on the other side, that it says number 2, just answer the question, what is art? Again, one sentence or a couple of words. You don't have to think about it too much. And I know this is easy for you guys because you're all in the National College of Art and Design, so you all know this, so it's going to be quick. Okay. I'm just going to collect a few of them. Your name is not on it, so you're not going to be challenged. Nobody will know. But I just want a few, right? So just give me one, another. Okay, take yours. Anybody else got one? Take yours. Okay, that's enough. Right, I'll shuffle these. Everybody knows who these are. And this is just to see, right, this is like a straw poll, right? So, question, what is culture? Okay, this one is, culture is our identity, heritage, and creative image. This one is, culture is art. This one is, culture is, oh, it's really small writing, I have to get my glasses. A reflection of the times, an interpretation. Culture is all the arts and your history, and culture is our identity. I've said that already. Okay, so now we'll look at what is art. Art is an expression and exploration of ourselves through creativity. Beautiful and visual, art is anything and makes people think about your life. Art is museums and history, and art is creation. Okay. I think that's a pretty typical example of the wide spectrum of interpretation of what culture and art is. In other words, you could probably get 100 reactions from 100 people that are different. Also, I think if you went out on the street in Dublin and asked a cross-section of people, you would probably get the following answer. If you ask people what is culture, like somebody said here, most people I think will say art. And if you ask them what's art, I think most people would say painting. And if you ask them what painting, they'll come up with names like Michelangelo or Picasso or Leonardo da Vinci. And I would say that would be pretty common if you went out into the street and asked people. And I think that's a big problem. And it's all my life that I've worked in this area, I think it's about this issue. Because what's happened there a lot of the time is that people are disempowered of their culture. And culture and art is something that is totally outside of their remit and something else entirely. And I'll just give you my impression of what culture is after working many years in it and what art is. And you can challenge me on this, and I hope you do, because I think I want to learn as well. But for me, my definition of culture is this, that it's a human invention or activity where we fill the space that we're all involved in here, our context, and it's everything that we do. So we fill that space with tables and chairs, and with architecture, and with food, and with speech, like me talking to you. Everything that we objectively fill that space with. So my space between you or between you, that's what we fill. We have to fill that space to actually survive and to live. And what we fill that space with is really important, because it can be very negative or it can be very positive. And if we don't have a real sense of that space, then I think we're in trouble. And I think the world is in trouble, as we know. And I think Ireland in particular is in trouble. But if you think about that for a minute, if you think that culture is everything that we create in this space, then art falls out of that the same as everything else. It's a reflection of that culture. And why it's important is, I'll tell you a little anecdote in that Trinity did a survey a number of years ago, a good few years ago now, which was a look at young people, teenagers in every city in Europe. And they looked at indicators like antisocial behaviour, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all of those issues, suicide, depression. And on the other side, they looked at positives like education, social behaviour, family, etc. And when they analysed all the data from around Europe, Dublin was on the bottom, and Amsterdam was on the top. And a lot of people were surprised because they thought, oh, well, Amsterdam, that's the home of drugs and blah, blah, blah. Which is not, if anybody who's been there knows, is the tourists come in and do that. But on the top, the reason they analysed, the reason for this was because the kids in Amsterdam felt they had an investment in their future. They could see that they were actually contributing to their own future. And that was what made them very positive and very animated. The kids in Dublin felt they had no investment in their future. They couldn't see a future, so they dealt with the immediate. And it was much easier to escape that fairly horrific vista of not having a future. So my definition of culture, I've come to the conclusion, is very simply, culture is about having a future. And it's as simple for me as that. So anything that I can contribute to that future in a positive way is what I would call culture in any situation. And then if I'm doing art or craft or anything, I would sort of refer to that and feel, okay, what am I contributing here? What's my role in my own future, first of all, and then in my community and my relationship with everybody else. So that would be my definition of what culture is. And I'd be very happy to hear other ones, because these things are always changing. And that brings us on to another issue, which is big issue for me over the years, which is cultural equality. And this is what the community arts movement that I was involved in the early days, and Noel Sheridan asked me to come in and speak on, was the community arts rose from a movement for cultural equality. Because one of the big issues is an equality around all of things, economic, social, etc. But I think cultural equality is one of the most important things. And what happens is we're disempowered of that from a very early age. And it's got worse and worse and worse. And in the present day, everybody's ideas are rubbish in favour of things you buy. You buy your culture off a shelf. So whatever idea you have is rubbish, but I have one here for €10 and it's fantastic. It'll really be a cultural experience. And I think that's a really negative approach to culture. So what we end up with is an education system that is based on a historical model of 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution, and it permeates here and everywhere else, that we're all dealing with this education system to produce, at the end of the day, something that will contribute to the economy. And so children, if you look at children are naturally creative, and they have no problem at all with creativity from an early age. There's a really interesting, some people might know this guy called Ken Robinson in England. He's a very, very interesting thinker on education. You'll find him on YouTube. He tells a little story which I think is both funny and interesting. But a little girl who loved drawing in school, 6 years of age, and she's one day furiously drawing at her desk. And the teacher comes down and says, "What are you doing? What are you drawing?" And she, without looking up, says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the child said, "They will in a minute." And this is children. I mean, they have total confidence and total belief in what they're doing. And if she can draw a picture of God, then everything else is pretty simple after that. So the problem, though, is as you go through the education system, this is squeezed and it's ground out of you until you end up that creativity drops and drops and drops and drops. And we all know that creativity and art is at the bottom of the scale, and at the top you have things like mathematics. And okay, they're important things, but I think creativity is really the most important thing within us as a species, human species. And we have been totally disempowered of this possibility. And you guys, or people in the college here, you're obviously very lucky and privileged to be in the college. And you have an opportunity, if you like, to investigate and champion these things. But by the time you get to the college, a lot of the time, all of that is drained away anyway, because as kids, we all know, and I went through it, anything creative was really stopped, and anything that was possible was stopped in favour of making you in some way fit into a square peg in a round hole of doing a job that will contribute to the economy. And we all know now, actually, where that's got us. But anyway, I think creativity and culture are where things should start and not finish. And Ken Robinson says again, he says that creativity is not really learned, it's lost. That we start with creativity and we lose it and we're disabused of it as we go through society. One of my heroes when I was younger was Joseph Beuys. I happened to meet him. He was here for one of the Rosca exhibitions, and I introduced myself. I was young at the time, and my inhibitions weren't maybe as much as they were now. And I really wanted to meet him, and I went and had a chat to him, and he talked to me for a long time. I was kind of mumbling along about what we did. I was involved in directing the centre at the time, the Breakline Arts Centre, and I said, a lot of what we do, or some of what we do, is political. And he stopped in that very German way that people do, sort of in my tracks, and he looked at me and he said, all art is political. And I didn't quite get it at the time, but I understand now totally what he means, in that it's back to this cultural issue again. Everything that we put out into the cultural space that we all inhabit is political in some way or another, because we change, we immediately make a statement and we change things in small or big ways. Maybe always big ways, if you believe in chaos theory. But I mean, we actually have a responsibility then to think about what we're putting out and what we're actually doing. But we also have an empowerment in that everything that we do is unique. It's totally unique to ourselves and totally unique to the moment. Everything, I mean, it's an amazing thought, isn't it, if you think that since the beginning of time, every one of us has been unique. I'm unique, absolutely. There's been no two of me ever. And I'm here, and everything I do is unique to me. And that's the same for everybody. And that's quite an astounding thought. So it makes everybody valuable. So even the worst case scenario, where you have people that are ostracized from society, and we know now, you know, people in what you might call disadvantaged communities are there because the responsibility, or the cultural and communal responsibility, has not taken care of people. And these people are just as culturally active. It's just, and I'll finish on this point, it's just that we see, the same as the developers in this great 10-year bubble saw areas as greenfield sites that were going to be development possibilities for them, that they were going to put up something that was going to be beneficial to them, and they didn't see what was there. A lot of people see cultural greenfield sites. They see spaces where people live that are actually cultureless, and there's nothing further from the truth. And it's a bit like what Brigitta was working on here with the older people. Everybody has a culture, and everybody has a cultural voice. We just don't hear it. So if you see graffiti, or you see a car burnt out, that's a statement. Somebody is trying to say something, and we just don't listen or hear it. And it's a statement from them that's just as valid as anything that appears in the Irish Museum of Modern Art, or anything that appears in any gallery. Because they are making a statement here, and they have consciously made this statement. So you have to listen to it. And people in communities have their own culture. It's very rich. They have stories, and they have their actions that they do. And that has to be valued equally before you do anything, because the equality of their voice is just as valid as the equality of your voice or my voice. And that's the point where you should start. That's where you should start with any cultural action. I think I'll probably finish up there, but I'd just like to say again, cultural development and understanding what culture means and understanding your place in it as a creator, that's a very responsible job. And for me, somewhere like the College of Art, where people who work in culture should be at the vanguard of change, because culture is about change. And for me, if I had any say in the way a country was run, like ours, I would put culture at the top of the agenda, and the economy should be in support of culture, and the culture should be as clear and as active and as rich as the country and the people itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you for standing for that very, I don't know the words in English, but very enlightening talk. And if anybody would like to have a question to any of us, yes. Yep.
Sandra, I know you've been involved in I suppose, community arts for many, many years, and I just wondered, you said that things have gotten worse in terms of cultural equality, and I know that it's kind of aligned with our capitalist society in some ways, but just have things gotten better? There has been a huge amount of work that's been done in the sector for years, and I just would like to see, are there particular changes that you have witnessed that you feel are progressive, or do you still think that we're chasing our tail?
Worse or better? I mean, that's a tough one to say, but I think one of the things that happened was with the community arts movement, that grew out of a very political milieu in the 70s, 60s first, then the 70s and into the 80s. And it really began in Britain, really, with the struggle between working class people and the socialist movement, and the what you might call the Thatcher era that came in, which basically destroyed it, to be honest. But I think what happened was that a lot of the ideas were adopted by people, but the politics was drained out of it. So what you had was, you had a kind of an empty shell left of the ideas. A really obvious one for this would be this idea of the cultural quarter or cultural building, you know, temple bar, whatever. So that came out of the radical ideas of cultural centres and labs all over Europe and America in the 60s and into the 70s, where the counterculture basically squatted and took over buildings because they couldn't have anywhere to make or display their work or do things. So they basically went in and took over places and did it themselves. And what happened after 20 years or so was that began to regenerate areas. And so the powers that be who make the money, etc., saw there's something in this. So by the 90s, they were building these things all over the place. But there was no substance in them. There was, how do you fill them? And what they went for was, a lot of the time, a venue and things attached, which I call the tyranny of the venue. Because if you've 500 seats to fill, that becomes your aim. That's your whole raison d'etre, to do this. Whereas the process was lost, and the politics was lost, and the radicalism was lost. And if you want to look at it historically, the sort of conservative years of Thatcher and Reagan and those consciously did that. And an obvious example of that was when they abolished the Greater London Council under Ken Livingstone and all those people. Because the Greater London Council was like an amazing organisation for funding a huge amount of cultural projects on all levels in London. And once that was abolished, all of that went. I mean, that was a huge, real and also iconic change in culture. Because we here also would have had a lot of relationships with them in Northern Ireland, etc. All disappeared in the early 90s because of that. So in short, in answer to your question, I think you really have to keep your eye on the sort of politics with a small p of it to be able to make change, and be very conscious of the fact that interventions without that sort of thought out background can end up sometimes being counterproductive, because they're linked to public-private partnerships, consortiums who are building, etc. And they're just marketing tools, really.
I heard once from the director of an Art and Public Places program with the difference between, I heard once from the director of an Art and Public Places program in the U.S. that the difference between graffiti and art was permission.
Yes, I think, well, it's an interesting point in that permission. Again, it goes back to people are not given. A lot of the time, you just have to give people the permission to do things, because people are disempowered so much from it. It's basically to say, what do you want to do? That's a simple question that's never asked. It's like, we have something for you, is always the way it comes in. I don't think that's very empowering. Sorry, you can say something?
Sorry, I just thought one of the things really interesting about just the school system kind of being anti-creativity and kind of pro-industry. This virtue, like, I'm in home education, and I know a lot of home educated people, and like, you see people who just come out of school and they're so terrified of making mistakes that they just can't do anything. Do you know what I mean? And you see home educated people, they've never been in school and they're just fearless. You know what I mean? I think art is really about not being afraid to make mistakes and not being afraid to be wrong or to be judged. You know what I mean? And that's kind of being taken away by school or by.
I agree, absolutely. I think absolutely that's true. In that school is all about not making mistakes, and it's more and more like that, and anti-creativity, and kids are fearless. That's absolutely true, and we should grow up with that, because that would mean we would fearlessly tackle and have no fear of failure or of making mistakes. And the whole school system is built around not making mistakes. And so it makes people absolutely terrified, I think, by the time they come out, which is a real shame. I think it's a terrible situation, really. But it goes back 200 years to the Industrial Revolution and what they were trying to do. And the school system hasn't changed much, really, since that.
Can I just add something here about working with older people? Can you imagine their feelings, start to paint and be creative? And it took 2.5 years with that particular group to break through a barrier to make them believe what they do. It's us valued, us any other people doing, and us creative, and make them to believe in themselves and be proud of themselves. And after the calendar project, when the calendar project went out into the shops and into the local community, and when they started to get phone call from their sons from America, from England, that Mom sent me over another pen because everybody admiring them, you could see the way they started to walk in the village was totally different. They became proud and they believed in themselves. But the first few years they were trying to bring in postcard and tracing paper, and I had to keep catching them. And they just didn't believe in themselves, and they thought what they do, it's all bad. This was their belief, and that was very deeply rooted. So the program was basically aiming to deroot that belief. And then with this particular project, we managed that. But that was 3 years, and it took a lot of effort, a lot of money, and a lot of trust from their side to trust us to work with them. Anybody?
I was just wondering how you would see changing the cultural context of our society in a way, in terms of education. That actually starts from there. And one of the things I've found, having been involved in community arts myself, is sometimes all you're doing is putting a plaster on a bit of the wound, and you really need to start earlier. And I'm just wondering how you would see that. Because I think creativity isn't just about the arts as we see them, and particularly in school as in drawing and painting. Creativity can come in how you educate them, and how you run an arts class. It doesn't have to be that you're just regurgitating that.
Absolutely. I think all creativity, everything starts with an idea, what you think. And every idea is pure in a way until you try and project it out into the cultural space. But everything starts with ideas. And it's obviously a huge task if you look at it on that scale. How do you change society, basically? But I've come to believe myself that you can only start with yourself. It starts with yourself, and you begin from that premise. And that's as important as anything else. There is only you, and there is only your life, and then you work out from that. I'm working on a new book at the moment called the Personal Revolution, because I think the next revolution is actually personal revolution. We've had all the political ones, but I think the next change has to come from people changing individually, because even revolutions are objective, as in you kind of have a get-out clause because you're involved in something that's not you. For real change to happen, I think it has to happen individually. So in my experience and all the work I've done, it's making those relationships. So you understand maybe where you're coming from. You go and meet somebody, be it a teacher or whoever, and they have a similar point of view, and you have a rich relationship. I think the quality of the relationships and the trust of the relationships is where it starts. So quality relationships will result in amazing work. So as Brigitta said, when she's working with those people, it's the trust that they have between them. It's all of them trusting each other in that room to be able to do something. So I don't have a big picture, I don't have a big idea about change society. I'm not even sure if there is a big idea. But all I can say is I know it starts with the individual.
I suppose just to follow on from that, I'm sure you're probably aware of Martin Rory, who works in the Arts Council, and I suppose this is one of his main areas that he essentially believes or states that the right to access to culture is enshrined in our Constitution, and that essentially the government is ignoring that right and not providing for it. And I was at a meeting in January, which was essentially about starting a campaign in Ireland to encourage the government to provide access to creative or culturally based education. I think it was along the lines, I don't know if people here might be familiar with, there was a campaign, a national campaign for the arts just before the last budget, so people were talking along those lines. But Martin Drury was saying, no, that it shouldn't necessarily have to come from the artistic community, they can be the drivers of it, but really we have to be talking to organisations like Bernardo's, starting with children if possible and in an educational context. So I don't know whether that has developed or that concept has developed from there, but it certainly is something that's been talked about a lot by a number of organisations.
Thanks.
I'd just like to say it's very refreshing to hear you speak about it. It really starts with the individual. I've done this seminar series, and that's the topic that I'm looking into. And we're always giving out about the education system, and we've been giving out about it since the 50s. And you know, it's just amazing that we still are. And I can't see, you know, a solution or whatever. Or certainly it would be over a very long period of time. But as I said, I'd like to commend you on speaking about, you know, it does start with the individual, and I think it really should start with the parent as well, you know, when the child is whatever, the size, or, you know, before they get into the education system. And if you can be open and let that child live and experiment and learn from that child, I think that's really where it starts, as opposed to trying to attack a huge system that's incorrect. You know, start, as you said, start, you know, with yourself and try and improve that way.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. I mean, trying to take a system on is crushing, you know, and it doesn't work. But dealing with your own life, if that is halfway balanced and happy, if you want to use that word, you know, then it has a huge effect on everything around you, I think.
Well, I find, again, just through the research that I've done and with my Clan Robinson and stuff, I have started to look at my own family unit as such, and that is just reflected on my friends who have kids the same age, and they're asking me questions about this, and it really has a ripple effect. It's amazing, you know, in a very simple way.
The revolution starts here.
I think it's just the timing of the last question because we are running to lunchtime now.
I'm so grateful I was in education, educated, if you like, before the point system came. Because there was room to meander, to make connections, to really the educarians, I think, draw forth and support, and was able to depart from the provided curriculum, and the teachers were smart enough to allow that to happen.
Absolutely, I think so. Absolutely, it's got worse and worse, and I think there's if you talk about fear, I think there's a lot of fear in the teaching profession now as well, from all different perspectives. They're working under terrible conditions and pressure. So it's not really an education system anymore. It's more a systematic kind of training, and it seems brutal in a way for everybody that's involved in it. Just one last thing. This is a book that I edited some time ago about this area of community arts. It's in the library here, but that has some of these ideas in it, and there's quite a lot of interesting people and comments within this, if anybody's interested in that. I think they have copies in the library here.
What's it called?
It's called An Outburst of Frankness. Whoever Frank Ness was.